Well, kia ora everyone, and welcome to FLUX Conversations on Aotearoa Design. Let us know if you can hear us in the chat. I'm Louise Kellerman, Design Assembly founder and director, and tonight we're here to talk about Aotearoa New Zealand design practice amongst COVID-19. But first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the DA partners, Blutui, Streamtime, Portfolio Recruitment, and my Chillybin. Tonight we'll speak candidly about how we are doing right now, explore the opportunities for change this reset presents from the way that we work day to day as a profession, how we collaborate with our clients and peers, and through to the macro visions of what we hope for our future, and how Aotearoa New Zealand designers can play a positive role in the world at large. So I'll turn my video on and stop sharing my screen. Hi everyone. And I would like to start with welcoming the panel. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation tonight. And welcoming our convener for the evening, Raul Sarot, who will introduce himself, and I'll hand the discussion over to him. Raul, kia ora.
Kia ora, Luis, and kia ora, community, and kia ora, guest panelists. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be helping out such interesting panel and also talking to you through the chat box that we have Nicole taking care of your comments that we will welcome at any stage. So my name is Raul Sarot. I'm a designer, Argentinian by birth, New Zealander by adoption. I've been in the country for quite some years and completely in love with Aotearoa, and as a designer very interested in New Zealand design and how might we tell our story and create our point of difference, not only locally but in the world, telling our story. So today I would like to introduce our panel, Karl and Phoebe and Sam and Chandra. And I will ask you guys to introduce yourselves so we can hear one by one your interesting stories, and your pipiha, Karl, for you, your mihi. So I will ask actually back to Aotearoa, and we are in this beautiful land. I would like to ask Karl to open the meeting for us, if you wouldn't mind, Karl. You need to unmute yourself. Tip of the day.
Rendered mute, story of my life. No. E mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnei kai hoho, tēnei kaihanga hau o te motu, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Nō reira, e karakia whakatīmatanga, kia whakarongo ake au ki te tanga i a te mātui. Tuia. Tui ai rora, tui raro, tui wahu, tui roto. A kāronga te pō, kāronga te ao. Ki waiki nu, ki waiki wō, ki waiki pāma mau. A tui ata moka he tangata whano, a haramai te toki haumi e hui e tāi ki e. So I just opened quickly with a speed karakia, which is kind of one that encourages us all to take in a bit of a 360-degree appraisal and about weaving together the threads of people that we can kind of strike out together. So it seems fitting for tonight. He urio o tahu pōtiki, so I'm Naitohu, ki te tautoko hakoroko waitaha ka te māmoe kaitahu me moriori hokiwi ki te tautoko hakui ko Ngāti Toa Rangatira Tiwi. So deep southern roots, so born in Bluff, raised in Heretaunga, so privileged to be here tonight to share in this kōrero. So I popped in the chat box before he whakatauki ko te kai a te rakatira he kōrero, ko te kai a te ariki he whakarongo. So the food of leaders is conversation and the food of chiefs is listening. So we get to do a bit of both tonight and all be that bit richer for it. So thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much, Karl.
Conversation.
Thank you very much. Welcome, and thank you for sharing that beautiful introduction to this journey. I love that idea of that 360-degree approach, really looking at ourselves and looking outside and looking around. and understanding who are with and where we are, and how do we look at the world, and how do we look at our land, and design as a vessel of opportunities, and as the connective tissue in between people and landscape and culture and technology and so on. So thank you for that. Phoebe, would you like to carry on from Karl?
Hard one to follow. Kia ora, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here with some really interesting characters on the panel. I'm a traditional kind of graphic designer turned general designer now. I guess we have to cross over so many disciplines these days. I currently work at a company called previously Unavailable, and have previously had a lot of my training at Alt Group. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how everyone's doing. I mean, I know personally, like in times of change, like as designers, we're sort of taught to kind of work and adapt to lots of change all the time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking more about that with the panel.
Thank you, Phoebe. That's awesome. Chandra, would you like to take over from Phoebe?
Thank you, and kia ora everybody. I'm Chandra and I'm the Managing Director of Access Advisors. Access Advisors is a digital accessibility consultancy that was born out of a market need for advice around improving the digital accessibility of interface design. The Blind Foundation in New Zealand created the company about 3 years ago, but we were set free just pre-lockdown. So we were as you know, a fledgling company sort of going out into the big wide world just before lockdown. But I have been working in the usability and accessibility space for the past 20 years here in New Zealand, in the United States and in the UK. So I'm really interested to hear everybody's story, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Chandra. That's awesome. Sam, would you like to close the introductions with your introduction, please?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. Kia ora. Karl, thanks for that beautiful karakia. Phoebe, hi. Louise, hi. Chandra, hi. Raul, hi. I'm Sam Southwell, Creative Director of Studio South, a design consultancy specialising in many disciplines in Auckland, New Zealand. Where I'm from, I'm a very proud Auckland chap. I wear the Tamaki Mikoto, I'm a poster boy for the city, born in Waitakere Hospital, and I represent New Zealand graphic design at the front line, and I'm keen to celebrate that in every way possible, help anybody that's interested in hearing conversations about New Zealand graphic design in any way that I can.
Fantastic. Have you rehearsed that introduction? Because it was so polished.
I am a salesman, and I do. I am at the front line of. I do find myself in boardrooms trying to convince people to buy into my thinking. So maybe that's where it comes from. I apologize for any toddler chaos you can hear in the background. I have family zone is quite hectic at this time of night. So if you hear any smashing on the door, that's my son wondering what I'm doing.
So Zoom rules is that dogs, babies, and noises in the background from whānau and cooking at this time of night are allowed. So
I have a Mexican dish on the go, actually. So
that's fantastic. All right, and thank you very much, Sam. And Louise, would you like to introduce yourself yet again?
I was just thinking I should just take my video down because what am I doing still up here?
Well, we are here because you invited us, so, you know, fair enough.
As I said, I'm Louise Kellerman. I'm the founder and director of Design Assembly, the community for New Zealand designers, and excited to gather in this online format nationally, which is really cool, and to really start these conversations about how we're all doing and kind of navigate a pathway through this, because as Raul and I were discussing earlier today, we're very much in the middle of this. There's not an end in sight. So we live in a time of flux, and it's about bending and moving like water with the times. So thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Louise. I would like you guys, the community out there, which I cannot see your faces, but I can read you, and Nicola will be able to read you too, and you can read between yourselves. If you would like to introduce yourselves, please do so in the chat box so other people know who is there, and a little one paragraph about yourself. Be nice while we talk about other matters. But we have an hour of time today, a little bit less or more. We are quite flexy in that sense. Hi, Clem. I see you coming in. We have like 4 topics or 4 questions, 4 areas that we would like to talk about, and we have around an hour. So I would like to divide around 10 minutes per question so we can do the rounds and hear from the interesting panelists. But before starting, really, how are we doing? You, Luis, said, how are we doing? How are we doing in this very strange, challenging, convoluted times? And not only here in Aotearoa, but in the world. And as we said before, we're connected. We are planet Earth. So, we are connected to the world in more than one way. Through culture, through people, through family, through business, through technology. How are we doing? So that's the question for you. How are you doing? And perhaps we can tag into that question. How are you doing, and how are you feeling, and how's your funnel, but also how's your business? Because we are here as designers, and that's ingrained in our fabric and what we do. So how are things going for you? The last will become the first. So Sam, would you like to start?
Sure. I think good, considering all things that are going on. That, like, I think it was interesting when you mentioned that obviously the name of this influx panel was an interesting one, because we certainly are doing that. And I'll jump straight into solutions because I like solutions. We're trying to, from a business point of view, stay positive. And back stability to attract stability. Some good advice that I had from someone I take a lot of good advice from. We want to promote ourselves as a design company that doesn't look like we're shrinking or laying off staff or it's downscaling in any way. We want to try and show stability through this period so that we attract stable companies in whatever markets they might be in, who can trust the fact that we have depth to deliver design solutions and ideas for all kinds of problems and needs. The main thing we've learned, I think, during the first lockdown, coming out of the first lockdown and entering what I'd like to kind of consider exactly what all the kind of professional economists predicted after a global event such as COVID-19, and the impact of it was this immediate, rapid kind of transaction-based kind of wave, which we all kind of, people were talking about the V and the W, and we definitely experienced a little bit of that. And so tried to learn how to sell outcomes, because a lot of clients that we normally work with, or new clients, in fact, were searching for outcomes from our consultancy, our business, brand and product and deliverables. Maybe not all 3, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 from that kind of lineup. And we realized quite quickly that we had to understand what their desired outcome was, so that we could actually prescribe a solution to first fit their intentions with their budget in hand, because budgets were shrunk. A decent size identity package for thinking and exploring ideas and possibilities as to the way a piece of design could solve a business's problems were not as deep, and products were kind of getting budgets were getting smaller. Websites, signage products, wayfinding products, apps, interface design, all the things that we work on, even marketing campaigns in our digital department, we're all getting a bit tighter from a budget standpoint. So we used to kind of validate time against scope, and we would me and my team would come up with, I guess, an estimated time that it would take sort of a group of people to solve a problem, and we'd prescribe a scope that could solve the problem based off that time. Now we're sort of trying to say, okay, that's the outcome you want. Maybe we can be quite innovative as a company and a team, or a smaller team, or flexible teams to solve those problems by not sort of putting hours to it, you know, simply sort of setting internal goals to quickly get an idea out and not do as much kind of messing around with fancy mock-ups and things, more iterating and sketching and, you know, prototyping our ideas in a much rougher format on paper, and being okay with that when we're sitting down with a client and just being like, look, sorry, you know, there's no fancy deck here. There's no kind of like glamorous presentation. This is quite raw design thinking, and, you know, we're actively collaborating with you to kind of quickly understand where your head might be at in terms of your desired outcome. And then once we kind of felt that, whether that be a Zoom conversation or a meeting, if we were in a level 2.5 or below, we were able to quickly understand the kind of input and collaborative kind of response to those conversations in rough design format, to then be able to go, okay, we can pick up the direction or the you know, their gut feel on what was going to be right for their outcome. And
so sorry to interrupt. You just mentioned something very interesting there, and perhaps you are already talking about the theme number 3, but that's great, because that's this a 360 organic in flux conversation, so we can fluctuate from one topic to the other. Something very interesting you said, because of all this, because of the situation, because of the constraints, because of the tighter budgets, because of all these things, because of people mindsets, we are kind of approaching it slightly different. We are getting kind of in a raw format with client to discuss ideas or approaches or problems. So instead of following a more traditional, lengthy, more expensive perhaps process. So have you changed, or have your company, so yourself, has it changed the way you are approaching and making it a bit more fluid, a bit more adaptable? Or
I think to be honest, we're just being a bit more clever with our use of time, and being okay with the fact that getting to the essence of an idea and sketching it, like, you know, live, or, yeah, like you say, kind of fluid with the client, without having to go away and, you know, like use a lot of polished design tools. Because I try to sort of educate people that, you know, the polished kind of real, like literal outcome of what we're trying to do for you, we'll get there soon. I think we used to spend quite a lot of time doing fancy presentations and mock-ups of ideas that were actually sometimes not going to be used. They were just like,
interesting.
Yeah, we had scope there to kind of in exploration phase or conceptual testing and thinking phase to get to the essence of a good idea and put that best idea forward and show it really nicely tested and show it kind of it being as successful as it could be, so that the client could see the power of the thinking, you know, into the future. I think a little bit less of that at the front, and kind of working the ideas and the more rough kind of thing, and being okay with that is actually
so
something.
it will be like going back to cooking your own bread.
yeah. I mean, it's like a recipe without kind of,
nice,
you know,
nice.
I love cooking, and that's a great reference, because I often think like you can make amazing food if you go and buy all the best ingredients and you layer them all out, and that's but you can also invent really good ideas and recipes when you've got limited ingredients and limited resources, and still come up with a fabulous dish. So I think that's probably the outcome here, is that we're dealing with less resource in terms of luxury sized scope, so we're having to be super innovative and a little bit quicker with our thinking to get to a solution for people.
Thank you, Sam. And I think that idea of going back to the basic ingredients, to the raw form, to the raw idea, to the raw understanding, the raw need, to then come up with what could be potentially, and co-creating with your client, is something really interesting that sometimes we embrace, and sometimes we are pushed to embrace by the situations. But that idea of bringing our clients or partners or whoever they are on board earlier in the piece, instead of the glossy presentation, go back to the raw ingredients, what really matters.
I mean, I had a meeting with a client tonight and I was like, look, I'm sorry, I don't have like a super fancy PDF here to sort of go through with you. I've just got some really rough sketches, but there's some really good design thinking here. And, you know, I've got my design director and a couple of my designers, and they're all sort of nervous, but the client was like, yes, there it is. That, I like that. And we were using like an arena board of kind of, I guess, motion references and things to kind of bring to life kind of, I guess, examples of the possibilities that whatever we were thinking about could turn into. And that was just enough for that client. He knew that where he was going with this design work. So successful.
It's very interesting because for those of us who have been long enough in the design industry and even pre-computer days,
yes, that's how
the idea of a sketch, of explaining something through a sketch, again, the raw concept could be, you know, whatever it is, or a mock-up of sorts.
Maybe COVID has slowed us down a bit.
Yeah, well, it's not maybe.
The rawness. You know, maybe we got a bit too comfortable in the luxuries of having all these fabulous tools to kind of like quickly iterate ideas. Maybe this has been nice to just kind of.
And I think it's interesting. It's something, again, to discuss further, is that idea of the slow culture when we went into level 4, that all of a sudden we were finding ourselves at home cooking with what we had because we didn't want to go out, or we couldn't go out in other countries. You couldn't go out at all. Yes. And again, making from the basics, again, from a design point of view, are we making from the basics and embracing the real core elements of what design is about, understanding that core need and come up with a core concept. Thank you, Sam.
Another good, well, just before I finish, one other really good piece of advice I've had lately is to not sell anything too complex from a sort of system build out point of view. Sell, you know, not safe, but you know, solutions that fit the environment that we're designing in, not design a system or an environment or an ecosystem at this point that's too complex during these times. I think that's probably some good advice I've had.
Thank you, Sam. Chandra, would you like to offer us your feelings, and how are you feeling? That was the question. How are you feeling? How are you, your funnel, your team, your business doing?
It's a really good question, because I kind of think that you've kind of touched on it, that other places in the world, people can't even go out the door. And I'm actually feeling really lucky to be living here in Aotearoa, because, you know, I've got friends overseas who they're really suffering, and we are pretty blessed to be living in a country where we can even be having these conversations about what design is going to look like, how we've been, when, you know, in other places in the world, they're just struggling to keep their heads above water and to keep food on the table. So I'm feeling pretty blessed to be here in New Zealand. And what I would say is, from Access Advisors' perspective, one of the things that I noticed during lockdown was that the introverts of the world are actually doing really well, being able to stay at home and do more of that thinking and have more of that space and have more of that time. But I agree with Sam that, you know, there is more, we have to be more flexible, and we've had to be more aware of other people's needs and limitations. You know, you made a mention, Raul, about, you know, being a little bit forgiving about noises, and Sam, your son banging on the door. One of the things that I noticed during lockdown was that we all just got a little bit kinder in some ways, and to me that was actually really, really important. You know, in the world where I work with a lot of people with disabilities, and quite serious disabilities in some instances, seeing how people just stopped being focused on the bottom line and now and more, and, you know, I just felt that actually, while there were some really bad things about lockdown and about COVID for sure, for us here in Aotearoa, we're actually doing pretty well. And, you know, from a business perspective, yes, we got hit. We had a real big hit as we went into lockdown. But what really happened, Sam, you mentioned, you know, the V, was that actually the need for my business actually increased before we even came out of lockdown. And I think that was because people realized we could do this work online. We could be having these conversations, and we could be being creative, and we could be designing solutions collaboratively and online in a much more forgiving and flexible way. And I think, to me, that's one of the big things that came out of it. So when you ask, Raul, how am I doing? I think really lucky. Feeling really, really lucky. And actually, I'm feeling really optimistic as well, because I think, while you're right, it is in flux, I think people are being more forgiving, and that's a good thing. You're muted now, Raul.
Yes, I didn't want to contribute to the background noise. That's a great reflection, and it's interesting. We were talking about academia before, and I was in a workshop in university. How lockdown made us even more human, or more understanding. You were saying kinder, and I agree, and more forgiving, and that can be applied to life situations, noises in the background, the quality of a render. Sam, to your point, how glossy the presentation doesn't need to be, and back to the openness and the acceptance. Interesting, and it's interesting how sometimes we think those things are really hard work and really hard to change as behavioral changes, and all of a sudden when they're imposed, they're coming naturally to us. That humanity, that openness, that understanding, that acceptance is naturally coming back to us. Thank you. Phoebe, how are you doing?
Hi there, I'm doing really good actually. I think personally it's been a time of change, to be honest. I moved into a new kind of leadership role kind of 4 months ago at the end of the last lockdown, new company, new processes, but I think times like this kind of test us as designers. Like, we're kind of trained to work in flux, or adapt to new things all the time with clients, or just our journey is like, how can you take a problem, how can you solve it? We're given lots of different problems all the time, and so I think if anyone's kind of equipped to sort of take on the challenge, it might be designers. So while I felt quite uncomfortable, especially in a new role, I think in a way it's sort of like a test to kind of see how we can adapt even more than we already do in our work. And I think to the points that the other guys have been talking about around just being like eternally optimistic, I think that is also our role as designers, both within ourselves to achieve the things that we want to achieve, but also like with our clients, like to guide them, like Sam was talking about, kind of guiding people through this, our clients through this journey. And I think everything from strategy all the way through to creating new ideas, like I think we can hold each other's hands and we can kind of get through it together. But I think also, I think I'm also good because I can see opportunities too with our clients. And I think that idea of being optimistic at the moment is almost kind of heightened. It's like, how can we seek new opportunities and challenges in times of flux? So yeah, no, I'm doing good. I think I've been I'm the first design hire in my new company, previously Unavailable, and so part of my role has been kind of figuring out what our design process is. And so it's been an interesting time Sam talking about his design process kind of changing and being more flexible. I've kind of had this really cool opportunity to kind of shape that within the company around kind of our sort of journey with the client from a design perspective. So yeah, I'm actually pretty excited, and in terms of my family and my fiance and things, like, we're all really good, and yeah, nothing to complain about on that front.
That's great to hear. It's interesting to hear you all, and to hear that sense in some of your words. I feel positive, I feel blessed, I feel thankful, I feel optimistic, I feel excited, and that's so great to hear. That's so positive and so exciting, actually, to hear that there is that underlying sense that even if we are under pressure for many things, from environment, from technologies, from diseases, from economy, we have that sense of positiveness to embrace, and we are optimistic as designers. Absolutely, that's a design trait. Karl, how are you doing? How is your whānau, your family, your business, your team? How are things?
Yeah, whānau is always brilliant. But then we've got good whakapapa, so never going to change. But yeah, look, hey, I think it's been a real, being honest, been a real roller coaster. You know, I think I've been talking to a few people about this phenomena, saying where things were kind of moderated and some semblance of normality, that we're suddenly thrust upon more peaks and troughs. You know, that we can go from flat stick one moment to kind of scratching your head in a bit of an empty space the next. You know, mentally, financially, business tempo, and so on. So I think that's been a wee bit of a change as people kind of, you know, particularly clients, and a lot of mine are sort of long-term on and off clients. You know, as you kind of see people, I guess, first they want to survive, they want to avoid dive, and ideally thrive. And depending on where they are in that spectrum, you know, some of them are hitting pause buttons, some of them are pushing fast forward, some of them have gone stop, reboot, you know, and there's a degree of unpredictability about it. So, so I guess, you know, we've needed to be quite agile and responsive to how we interact with that, because we'll have, you know, somebody wanting to pivot, and they need that creativity. You know, they need that other view, a different mindset, a different way of looking at things to kind of help, you know, through that sort of pivot process, a fundamental rethink. So I think where people are going through some of those quite fundamental shifts, you know, we've suddenly become probably a more valued asset. Whereas, but I think at the same time, I agree with Chandra in that about, you know, we've heard the rhetoric from government about, you know, being nice and being kind and he waka iki no, you know, we're all in this together. And I think that sentiment has kind of flowed through everyone in a way that's kind of dialed it up, like it was there. It's already who we are, but it's kind of amped it up. You know, a few things, the mixing desk of our kind of values and things, I think some of our positive things have really amped up. So
that's interesting.
You know,
that's interesting. What not only ignite in us, but what ignite as a country. That's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yes, I think, you know, concepts like you know, manaki that tend to be a word on a wall somewhere in an office, we're kind of seeing exuded all over the place. You know, te aki tangata, te aki taio, looking after people, looking after the environment. I think there's kind of a heightened conscience of what really matters to us.
Absolutely.
And it's shifted. It's then shifted what we prioritize in our lives, and shifted maybe what we start to look for in our work. You know, what is the reward for us and our whānau, and what is the benefit to others?
I think that reconnection is so linked, and doesn't matter if you're talking about a presentation, a glossy presentation according to some, or you know, our kindness, or you're saying our reconnection with our values, our entity as a country, and how it's interesting how when we or humans are under pressure, true values, true colors arise. And that idea of reconnecting at another level and understanding and being open and really capturing what is of value, not financial value, what is of real value, you know, into other people's and other businesses and other, you know, whatever. That's great. It's amazing, right? We only started and half an hour is gone. Where's that half an hour gone? My goodness. So I would like you, each one of you, to think at 3 levels. And so we already touched into this, what has changed, what is new, what are new techniques or methodologies or connections or way of beings are we implementing. But basically through COVID, which is the challenge posed here, right? I mean, in time of flux, we are always, I mean, the world is constantly in a time of flux. It's a fluid matter. Everything is realities, context, people, technologies, behavior, everything is constantly fluid. What happened this year worldwide is because of COVID, some of those changes accelerated, right? We could see changes in a month or in 2 weeks that we haven't seen. If people would have said to you, and you will all have to be locked down for 3 or 4 weeks, we will say that's impossible. People won't do that, and we did it, and we did it yet almost again. So it's amazing what we can do, our flexibility. But my question to you, 3 things. What has changed? What do you see has changed forever or temporarily? What hasn't changed? What is still the same and will perhaps keep on being the same? And what is new? And what do you see is new in the way you work as designers, in the way you work as researchers, in the way you work as academics, in the way you as business coaches or advisors or graphic designers? What has changed? What hasn't? And what is new? And how do you portray that forward into what you see coming in the next few months and the next year? So it's a big question, but basically has those 3 components. What has changed? What hasn't? And what do you see new that could be new as opportunities or new moving into the future and the next year? Phoebe, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's changing or developing kind of every day is just this kind of like crossover or like kind of melding of disciplines. Like, you know, we're always like in the studio, like we're always kind of not even collaborating, but just kind of, yeah, working so closely with lots of different disciplines, and it really just depends on the client's needs. I think that maybe COVID is kind of heightening the need to do that and be really flexible from a discipline perspective. And so when I think about who we might hire for our design team, it's like, well, you know, like this kind of multidisciplinary kind of role is really becoming even more prominent at the moment. I think wearing kind of multiple hats. And I think just day to day, that kind of change of, well, actually what hasn't changed as much is really just like being in the studio is so important. Like, you know, having those like personal conversations, I really value that from a creative perspective. There's nothing quite like being in the same room and being able to talk something through and kind of interrogate ideas on that level. Does that sort of answer the question, Raul? What have I missed?
Absolutely.
Mute,
that answers the question, is that what has changed for you? What do you value or revalue again? That, you know, and so what do you see as opportunities moving forward in the future? What do you see as new and potentially could happen, even if it's not new as yet, could be something new to look into? Yeah,
I think we work with a lot of entrepreneurs and new ventures, and I think there's a lot of opportunity with kind of new products and services to kind of better our lifestyles. I guess our lifestyles and everyone's is changing in their own ways, and I think through new products and services and guiding our clients to really kind of disrupt categories, I think there's lots of opportunity there. Like I think, like I was saying before, as designers, we have this kind of training to be able to push boundaries, and I think there's just opportunity there. And I think, again, back to the cross-disciplinary, I think there's lots of opportunities there as well. Yeah.
Thank you. It's interesting. I can imagine, I already see comments on the side and people flowing their own ideas. Of course, our community, all of you guys, they are listening to this and listening to Karl, Phoebe, Sam and Chandra talking. I would love to hear all of what are the things that have changed for you, what is the same, and what do you see as opportunities. So please, again, feel free to feed your thoughts in the chat box. We would love to hear from you as we talk as well, and then to review, right, because it's recorded so we can all share. It'd be great. It's fantastic. So Karl, how and again, I would like all of you to open perhaps also your microphones. I wouldn't mind an open conversation. But yeah, Sam, tell us how is it for you?
Oh, I think, you know, to just going on your answer, your questions, you know, change for me is I think there's been some quite nice conversations already about the acceptance and you know, we've lived long enough now with kind of the impacts of a global event such as this. And, you know, if you think back to some of the other impacting global events in human evolution, you know, I'm sure other generations many times and, you know, before us have experienced similar kind of confronting environments. And one thing I think you learn quite quickly in an environment like this is that that acceptance and that there is new territory to be explored. And that kind of leads to new markets. And obviously we're dealing with this crazy real concept of climate crisis and a lot of the impacts that that's having on this earth. And you know, I've even got crazy conspiracies that this was like, you know, they put this here in a way to kind of address some of the bigger issues this planet's got going on, and that's a completely separate conversation. But change is happening so fast now, and so many people are acting on change, and they're accepting that it's needed to be there. And I think that's super exciting, and that kind of essentially leads to your next thing, that there's new thinking and you know, a curiosity for new and a curiosity to sort of solve some of these strange kind of things that are presenting themselves as urgent things to solve. And that just makes designers and people that are clever and people that can think innovatively and creatively to kind of express visually ways to inform that change. That's super exciting. And you know, we're just like, as you know, I like a bit of stirring up is kind of good for designers, because I think if you get too stuck in an envelope or you try to formulate design, that's boring, and it's not what it entertains creative sensibility. So for the new ideas and thinking in spaces that are coming out of this, I'm just excited by that. The same things. Look, you know, I'm a nut bar, and I've been a nut bar for a long time, but my core design principles are the same. I design to endure. I try to design solutions that will last, with a sustainable kind of approach to thinking about how the outcomes can last. You know, I still value what Phoebe said, you know, the culture of being able to collaborate with thinkers and makers and doers to solve problems. That is just the best thing ever. And, you know, what you know, Chandra said, we are so lucky here in New Zealand to be able to, you know, get out there and go to our studios in level 2 now, 2.5, even be able to like probably walk past each other in the street. Some people are really restricted by this. And I think, so, you know, maybe the same is that this is going to go on. I mean, we have clients in the States right now, and they've been in lockdown since February or January. Like some people that haven't even been out of their restrictions for 6 months. I mean, that's just crazy. You know, those core principles of design, I still look back to, you know, the people that I've admired for years, Swiss designers that were coming up with like the core, you know, forms and structures to influence design systems. I still look for that. So that's the same for me. I reference the same core principles. I go back to the same grid books, and I go back to like, you know, Armin Hoffman's work, and I just about find a solution and things in what he was doing, you know, 60 years ago. So that's still the same for me. In terms of opportunities, I think there's this whole new wicked inclusive movement in design where we're designing less. And I really like this. We're designing less finished solutions and transactions now. We're actually designing solutions for an inclusive world where, you know, it's a bit like Tetris. You can plug in new things and let the system grow, or let the ideas grow. And I really, really enjoy that. So I used to sell a lot of finished transactions, like try to just make it perfect. No, not that anymore.
That's interesting.
I guess Tetris-like, where you can plug in new modular, ongoing, growing kind of design systems. I think that's exciting as opportunities.
Thank you, Sam. Chandra?
Hi again. The things that have changed for me, as I mentioned, I think sort of touched on before, is that more social conscience and the fact that people are, you know, being more aware. I think what that means to me is that I'm seeing more people wanting to be more inclusive. One of the questions that was asked over in the chat was around, you know, what were the issues, what were the major issues around accessibility during lockdown? And for me, the biggest change is that people have tried to push online really quickly, being really agile, Sam, and moving really, really fast. But what that's done is that they've often forgotten about accessibility, even more so than normal, if that makes sense. So one of the things that I see as an opportunity is that in the future, if we can help businesses continue to move at pace, but to weave the accessibility magic through their processes so that designers don't think of it as a separate thing and developers don't think of it as a separate thing. It is just design, right? You know, for me, creating accessible designs or creating designs for inclusivity is just doing our jobs properly as designers.
Absolutely.
And I kind of think that whole thing around, you know, as designers, our role is to be the voice for the customer, and not just the customer that it's easy to design for. And I think sometimes we forget that, is that sometimes it's really easy just to design for mainstream, get it on there, get it up, get it quick, and the businesses will make their money. But the one thing that I've noticed as well is that there's a lot of businesses that are struggling to keep the lights on. And wouldn't it be nice if they realised that by just taking a little bit more time and thinking a little bit more inclusively, they could be opening up their market to an even wider group of people. You know, that's one thing that I can see as a huge opportunity is that if we continue to work at pace, but we think more inclusively at pace, then maybe we'll be able to increase the market share as well as increase the experience, improve the experience for people who have those access needs. I think the change that I've seen, the biggest change that I've seen is that I'm seeing more webinars, mainstream webinars, and more events and so on with people who have disabilities. They're coming out of the woodwork. I suppose COVID kind of was a little bit of a leveler, if that makes sense, because we all were locked down. And for a lot of people who have disabilities, that's what they live with on a daily basis. So we got a little taste of what it might be like to have to be at home all of the time and not be able to get our groceries delivered when we want to, and not be able to go to the warehouse or whatever and get those new pots or whatever it was. So I kind of think the change is, it may be subtle, but I do think that social conscience has become more apparent to me, and the opportunity is to capitalize on that, not let it go, to hold on to it and make it drive design from a more inclusive perspective. Really,
that's a great point, Chandra. That's a great point, and was mentioned before as well, right? The fact that we are becoming more human. You say kinder earlier in the intro. We are becoming, well, we became kinder, more understanding, more open. And that absolutely is related to inclusivity, and it's related to that understanding of diversity. But your point that right there's not also a human opportunity, but also a business opportunity.
Business opportunity, yeah, absolutely. And I think we forget, right, is that, you know, everybody who has a disability, they're still buying their groceries, they're still paying their power bill, they're still buying their pots and pans. And if businesses aren't capitalizing on that, there's a potential 24% of the population in New Zealand, you know, over 1 million people in New Zealand have some form of permanent disability. And if we're not considering that when we're designing the interfaces, however quickly we design it, however you know, flexibly we're designing, if we don't consider that market and all of their friends and family and all of the other people who have temporary disabilities and situational impairments, if we don't consider that from a business perspective, doesn't matter how quick you get online, if you're cutting out a quarter of your potential market, that's not a good thing to be doing.
That's great insight, Chandra. Thank you very much. I love that concept of how can we move at pace? How might we move at pace, but being inclusive at the same time? Excellent. Karl.
Sure. So much brimming in the mind, eh? But listening to all this kōrero, one thing sort of struck me, which is that the rest of New Zealand is becoming increasingly Māori. And why I say that is all the things you've been describing about you know, being more collaborative, more inclusive, more levelling, you know, a greater line of sight to sort of gaps and disparities. Well, you know, sort of welcome to our world. So, it doesn't have the same airs and graces. I guess, you know, Sam, you're talking about that, you know, departure from the slick pitch to the honest, you know, mucking in. Here it is, warts and all, let's work together stuff. Well, that's just how Māori roll. So, you know, so I kind of, for me, I've actually seen this kind of sensibility shift actually come closer to Māori sensibility. But at the same time, I think that has attuned people to the sort of things you're talking about, Chandra. Like, I think the gaps are more visible, you know, the disparities have become more notable. But I think with that has become a heightened sense of empathy and care about that. So, you know, and I think I'm seeing that sort of sensibility flow into appetite for reform, appetite for change, you know, maybe appetite for good. You know, so I think that's a really positive phenomena. And I guess the other thing for me that has changed is, I think in that state of flux, you know, I can't remember who said it about, like, you know, there's no time for change like when change is afoot. So similarly, I think it's liberated people to maybe tackle some of those things that have been sitting in the too hard basket. You know, challenge status quo, reframe, rethink. I mean, I'm knee deep, I'm neck deep into sector reform projects at the moment. I'm in the deep of justice reform of the correction system, and I'm sitting on the board with the Tertiary Education Commission for the review of vocational education. Now, my sense in there is actually what we've got is has been a noose around our neck for fucking generations of structural constraint. My sense is the kind of level of heart and appetite to fundamentally shift some paradigms is stronger now than it was pre-COVID. You know, that people are kind of applying that same scrutiny of change and difference and the opportunity to reset, rethink is kind of broadening. So, so I'm enjoying that appetite because that's kind of, for me, that's where I derive pleasure, you know. The opportunity to promulgate positive change. And we've kind of got this open space for it at the moment. And we've got to kind of seize it because it won't last forever. You know, people will settle and things will norm again. So wherever we hit that norm, we kind of got to get our job done before then. You know, so and there's other places where this has happened, like with the Ru Whenua, the earthquake in Christchurch. That same phenomena occurred there. You know, there was a big flurry of innovation and change and things, and then it kind of has settled into a new normality. So the window is relatively short, and designers arguably should be thriving in that space and should actually be promulgators of some of those changes. You know, but it's a challenge to us too, and a challenge to our practice to kind of be prepared to flex and to kind of actually interrogate ourselves, like, why are we doing this? Are we doing this for good? And I'm not going to put profit as an ogre, but if that's the sole driver of the work you're associated with, kind of, you know, have another think. Because I think
that's fantastic what you're saying, Karl, right there around we need to size the opportunity because this won't last forever. And we already realized that with the first lockdown and then this pseudo-normality that we went to for level 1 for some time, and all of a sudden we are back in 2 or 3 or 2.5 or and now 1 for some areas, for some regions. The opportunity, the window of change won't be open forever. And what's our role and responsibility? Back to your point, Chandra, there around, we need to move up pace, but we need to bring inclusivity into it. You, Karl, are saying New Zealand is becoming more Maori. Awesome.
I love that, Karl. You know, that's some of your insights are fantastic, and you know, this whole, you know, being a bit rougher is kind of the Māori. Well, you know, like, look, I've studied a lot of Māori, like, you know, design and the way that it has come out in like sort of very tactile, physical, detailed form. And if you started rough with the concepts and you definitely got to the polished at the end in some of the beautiful history this country has. So that's amazing that you know, you can, it's a kind of a case study or a success that you can start rough in the thinking and wind up with something really beautiful at the end. Your do good narrative, I mean, that's just, you know, if I can add anything to that, it's so if you can do good and put a smile on people's minds while doing so, then you're even doing better. I love that. You know, if I can, I love jokes and I love humor and I love like warming any kind of like, you know, design transaction with some kind of smile or some kind of like positive kind of happiness associated to the work. So if you can, you know, enlighten people's moods while doing good, then in these times, that's successful in my mind.
Sorry, Raul, to Sam's point earlier on about the whole agility, one of the things that I've seen that I just really loved about the whole COVID, the whole lockdown thing is that how quickly everybody moved to bridge that digital divide that had been there, but you know, that is so historic, and that we still haven't fixed it, but at least there was so much momentum that was created almost overnight. How do we get computers to people who don't have computers? How do we get groceries to the most vulnerable who can't get out to get their groceries? How do we get learning to students who can no longer come into the university? What I think is really interesting is that a lot of those innovations that occurred during lockdown with things that the disability community had been asking for years and been told you can't have that thing. So, you know, like the disability, the students, Disabled Students Association at Vic University, they had been lobbying for years to get the content, the lecture content online, so that those who were immunocompromised and who found travel difficult or who were neurodiverse could stay at home and learn. And they were always told, no, we can't do that. And then COVID happened, lockdown happened, and like that, within a couple of weeks, oh hello, all of a sudden, everything that couldn't happen before did happen. And I think that innovation, that we had to do something, and we had to do it quickly, it addressed a lot of those inequalities. The inequity, not only as Karl's mentioning, culturally we've kind of leveled up a little bit more and become more Māori, but we've also leveled up a little bit more and become a little bit more impaired, if I use my air quotations. We've all started to think about things slightly differently, and I love that the negative aspect of COVID actually had so many positive outcomes. It was brilliant.
That's because you're an optimist, and that's our role as designers. We need to stay positive and be optimist and see opportunities where actually seems to be problems or challenges or the dark forces or the dark sides or the downsides of things. We see the good sides, we see the possibilities, the opportunities, what can be done better, what can we become more inclusive, more human, more Maori, according to Karl. How might we create better worlds, which is what we do as designers, more inclusive, faster, more profitable, more whatever it is for each one of them, right? So more human for some others. That's great. We are amazing, right? Where's that hour gone? It's 8:05. We started 7:05. Right on time, Luis. Thank you for being such a great timekeeper around those things. And thank you very much for all that lovely chat with thoughts and, you know, and comments and insights that is flowing on the side. Thank you to all of you, community, making us talk about interesting things. And thank you, Luis, for the invitation, and Design Assembly for creating this space, holding space, and creating this space for these conversations are also the opportunities, I believe. So thank you very much to each one of you. And because we are in the cusp of finishing this, and we will extend, if you wouldn't mind, you panelists and you audience, thank you, community. Just to leave one thought, and I will like to bring two worlds here, the world of wish and hope with the word of a manifesto of let's do this. What each one of you would like to bring in between, weave like a kete, your wishes and hopes with your, come on guys, let's do this as designers, what that would be to enlighten us, that's a word there to give us hope and give us strength to carry on into the 2021 in a better way, what that could be. Who would like to go? All of us can have an open conversation. Let's open the microphones.
I think you probably already know what mine might be.
Yes, I have it on a post-it note.
Figured you might do. But I just think that, yeah, my hope, my dream, and actually I love the metaphor of weaving the kete is that actually I think we need to weave accessibility and or inclusivity into everything that we do. I think that's what I want. I want designers to be the voice of the customer, be the voice of the user, the customer, the people, and everything that we do, and for all customers, not just the easy ones.
Thank you very much.
Mine is for everybody to work hard and not be lazy during this, so that we can work together as a country full of so much diversity, full of so much inclusive variety, and but if everybody works hard and there's no laziness, we will literally have the best place on earth here in New Zealand, and just such a wonderful life ahead of us if we can do that. I think if people let the team down through laziness, that doesn't bode well with me. I'm a real hard worker, and I truly believe that everyone should be pitching in.
Yeah, sorry, Phoebe. We will call you to make us, go hard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
I was just going to follow on with Sam in terms of I think my wishes is that as designers we'll just be eternally optimistic and relentless with our ideas always, no matter what the kind of situation is. And I work with I do part-time teaching at AUT as well as my design job, and I think I try and instill that in the students, like who is the next generation coming forward, especially in amidst COVID, and how can we kind of instill optimism and kind of relentlessness with ideas into them as well.
Thank you, Phoebe. Karl?
I guess mine's quite simple, and I guess it's a bit of a pledge and a challenge. I'd just say, te aki taio, we've got to look after the environment. Te aki tangata, we've got to look after people. Te aki kainga, look after the village. So we've got that ability through our mahi to do that. So, I think look at what you do and consider how it contributes to those things, because they're all struggling. Communities are struggling, people are struggling, the environment's struggling. Our opportunity is to actually have a positive impact on that, not a detrimental one. So challenge yourself to have a positive impact in everything you do.
Awesome. Wow. Kia ora. Louise, what is your hope and what is your wish?
My hope and dream is to place the planet and people first. And the challenge that I would like to give the New Zealand Aotearoa design community is to come together and develop a manifesto and sign and agree to this. once and for all.
Thank you very much, Luis, and we will follow behind you. We will all work together on this. I just coincidentally, I read briefly a few days ago that Australia are putting together a group of designers to design the new future, what is coming, and to understand the challenges and opportunities. Wouldn't it be great if that happens here as well? And if it doesn't happen, can we make it happen? So that's my challenge for all of us, not for all of you, for all of us. Can we come together and help design those better futures, which are looking after the environment, looking after the people, looking after the village, the community, and being inclusive, of course, because that's part, and remaining optimistic, but back to some working really hard at it, because that is required to work hard at it and to stay strong. So kia ora and kia kaha, everyone, and thank you very much, all the community that have been listening to us and hearing us and looking at us and commenting and contributing to this mahi. So thank you very much. Luis, I will pass it on to you, and I would like to thank the panelists, Karl, Phoebe, Sam, Chandra. You've been really inspirational, and
Kia ora.
I learned from each one of you and the comments, and I love the mahi, and I'm excited about the opportunities. My wish and my hope and also my manifesto is, let's do this. We are the ones that could help activate this change. We are the ones that could help design this change. We are the ones to understand the needs and see them as opportunities and to design that change. So let's do it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Raul, and thank you to the panel. And of course, thank you again to the Design Assembly partners and also the Design Assembly friends, because without them, Design Assembly wouldn't exist. And thank you to the wider Aotearoa Design community as well, as we all work together to create the future of our community.
And to close, if I can steal a minute of time, thank you, Luis, because your mahi, your work through Design Assembly, the inspiration, the leader bringing together and creating these spaces. Create space is important. Create space for conversations. Your original tagline of Design Assembly was conversations in graphic design. Now it's much more than graphic design. It's conversations in design, right? And you are the driver of creating these spaces, being physical spaces, being, you know, today is Zoom, tomorrow is a workshop, the day after is your website, of course, always, and all of that is fantastic. So, you know, kia ora and kia kaha for your work, and well done. Thank you.
It's that connection, Louise. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Raul. It's my pleasure to connect everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, and yeah, go and have your dinner if you haven't, or your glass of wine, or your cup of tea for some of you. And good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
See you on the road.